The noon sun hung over the cracked earth of rural Texas like a judge's gavel, merciless and unyielding, baking the air into a shimmering haze that distorted the horizon. It was July 2020, and the cicadas screamed their endless hymn from the mesquite trees lining the fence, a sound that clawed at the edges of sanity if you let it. Lila Torres, 18 years old and built like the barbed wire that hemmed in her family's forgotten ranch, knelt in the dim cool of her grandfather's barn, the heat seeping through the weathered slats like an unwanted intruder. Sweat traced slow rivers down her temples, pooling at the collar of her faded tank top. But her hands, calloused from years of mending fences and hauling hay, moved with a reverence that bordered on ritual. Before her on a splintered workbench lay the rifle, a 1903 Springfield, its once proud blued steel now pitted with rust that flaked like old blood, the wooden stock scarred by decades of grip and grit. It wasn't much to look at, this relic from the Great War, but to Lila, it was a talisman, a whisper from the grave that promised more than it appeared. She dipped a rag into a tin of gun oil, the sharp metallic scent cutting through the barn's musty underbelly of hay and leather, and worked it into the bolt with deliberate strokes. The mechanism clicked open with a groan that echoed her own quiet doubts. Would it even fire after all this time? Abuelito had sworn it would, his voice a gravelly rumble in her memory, carried on the wind from those long afternoons when the sun beat down just like this, turning the world into a forge. El rifle fantasma, Misha, he'd say, his leathery hands guiding hers along the barrel as they sat cross-legged in the dirt yard, the noonlight glinting off the empty chamber like a secret shared between conspirators. It don't shoot bullets. It shoots souls. Feels the winds lie, the target's fear. You listen close, and it'll tell you things no eye can see. Back then, at 10 years old, she'd giggled, her pigtails bouncing as she squeezed the trigger on a makeshift target of soda cans balanced on fence posts. But even in her laughter, there was a thrill, a curiosity that prickled her skin like the first drop of sweat on a sweltering day. What if it was true? What hidden stories did this rusted ghost hold, passed down from her great-grandfather, a doughboy who charged the machine gun nests at Belleau Wood? The rifle saving his life when modern Springfields jammed under the barrage? Lila paused, her rag hovering, as a shadow flitted across the barn door, the sun's midday arc, casting long fingers of light that danced like specters. Her heart stuttered, just for a beat. The old ranch too quiet since Abuelito's passing last winter. He'd gone in his sleep, the doctor said, but Lila knew better. It was the weight of those stories, the ones he told only in the harsh light of noon, when the shadows were shortest and truths hardest to hide. Stories of the rifle's whispers, how it had guided her great-grandfather through mustard gas clouds, the barrel warming under his palm as if alive, pointing true when compasses spun wild, and her own father, Carlos Torres, who'd carried it to Iraq in '03, not as a weapon, but a charm against the desert's deceit. Carlos had been a mechanic in the 82nd Airborne, his letters home filled with jokes about sand-clogged engines and midnight poker games, but always ending with a postscript for Lila. Tell Abuelito the old ghost kept me steady today, felt it in my bones. Then, in 2007, the call came at noon sharp as a rifle crack, while Lila was home from school, the sun blasting through the kitchen window like an accusation. RPG ambush near Fallujah, the chaplain's voice had droned over the line, flat and final. He didn't suffer. But the rifle had come home in pieces, crate shattered in transit, or so they said. Lila had pieced it back together herself that summer, under the relentless Texas sun, her 12-year-old fingers black with cosmoline and grief, wondering if the rust hid the soul her father had poured into it. Now at 18, with her mother working double shifts at the diner in Lubbock just to keep the lights on, Lila traced the stalk's deepest gouge, a crescent scar from some forgotten battle, and felt that same pull, a curiosity laced with dread. Enlistment papers lay folded on the workbench beside a half-eaten peanut butter sandwich, the ink still fresh from the recruiter's office that morning. The Army promised structure, paychecks, a way out of this sun-blasted limbo where dreams evaporated like morning dew. But not just any slot sniper school, whispered in her ear by the recruiter after she'd mentioned the rifle during the aptitude test. Girl with a shooter's eye like yours? Fort Moore's calling? Lila had laughed it off then, the noon heat in the strip mall office making her head swim. But the idea had rooted deep. Fed by Abuelito's tales and her father's ghost. What if she took the old Springfield with her? What if it whispered secrets in the Georgia pines that no one else could hear? She chambered a dry round, the action smoother than expected, and shouldered the ghost, sighting down the rusted barrel at a knot in the barn beam 40 yards off. The noon light slanted through, dust motes swirling like battlefield smoke, and for a heartbeat, she swore she felt it a vibration, faint as a pulse, urging her trigger finger steady. Click. Empty, but the air hummed with possibility. Or was it just the cicadas, mocking her from the heat? 2 years blurred by in a haze of boot camp sweat and midnight doubts, but the sun always found Lila, marking time like a relentless drill sergeant. By summer 2022, Fort Moore, once Benning, rechristened in a nod to the past, sprawled under Georgia's humid noon sky, the red clay ranges baking to brick hardness, mirages dancing off the asphalt like taunts. Lila stepped off the bus at 1100 hours, duffel slung over one shoulder, the Springfield's case clutched in the other, like a forbidden talisman. The air was thick, a stew of pine resin and gunpowder, the sun a white-hot hammer pounding her olive-drab uniform into submission. Sniper school intake was a cattle call. 200 hopefuls from across the branches, eyes hollow from the flight, milling under the water tower's shadow, as instructors barked names like verdicts. Lila's turn came midline, the sun cresting its zenith, turning the world to a squint. Gunnery Sergeant Maria Reyes, Iron Mama to those who'd survived her, stood at the table, her frame compact and unyielding. Dark hair pulled tight under her cover, eyes like polished obsidian that missed nothing. Torres, Lila M., the clerk read from the roster, voice cracking under the heat. Lila snapped to attention, her 5'4" frame ramrod straight, the rifle case bumping her knee. Reyes glanced up, her gaze flicking to the battered hard case, then back to the file. Sniper track from basic, scores say you've got the eye 95th percentile on quals. But what's this? She tapped the case, the sound sharp as a slap. Lila swallowed, the sun's glare off the table making her squint. Family heirloom, Gunny, 1903, Springfield. Request permission to qualify with it. A ripple went through the line snickers from the cluster of males behind her, a tall blonde with a cocky grin elbowing his buddy. Reyes's eyebrow arched, a sliver of curiosity cracking her iron facade. Rusted antique? Army issues M2010s for a reason, Private. Text the future ballistic computers, thermal overlays. You think a museum piece'll cut it in the shade? Lila met her stare, the noon heat coiling in her gut like a spring. With respect, Gunny, it's more than metal. It's got history. Feels the shot before I do. The snickers swelled. The blonde Sergeant Kyle Harlan, his name tape gleaming, leaning in with a drawl thick as molasses. History. Looks like it fought the Alamo and lost, sweetheart. Stick to issued gear, or you'll be polishing latrines by lunch. Reyes held up a hand, silencing the buzz, her eyes boring into Lila's like she was sighting a target at 1,000 yards. The sun beat down, sweat trickling between Lila's shoulder blades, but she didn't flinch. There was something in Reyes's pause, a flicker. Perhaps recognition of that same stubborn fire that had carried her through Gulf One sandstorms. Permission granted for now, but you wash out. It's on you. Rack up, Torres. Range is at 1,300. Lila nodded, grabbing her gear, the weight of the case suddenly heavier as she weaved through the dispersing crowd. Harlan's voice trailed her, low and laced with venom. Eagle Eye Harlan bets Rust Bucket's first qual's a 0. Who's in? Laughter chased her to the barracks, the sun dipping toward afternoon but no cooler, turning the walk into a gauntlet of stares and whispers. The sniper barracks were a squat brick bunker on the edge of the ranges, fans whirring futilely against the midday mugginess that clung like a second skin. Lila claimed a bottom bunk in the corner, the Springfield case stowed under the mattress like a guilty secret, its outline pressing against the springs. Noon chow was a hurried affair in the mess hall trays of mystery meat and watery gravy under fluorescent glare that mimicked the sun's cruelty. But Lila barely tasted it, her mind replaying Reyes's words, Harlan's smirk. By 1300, the platoon mustered on Range 5, the sun a brutal overseer, turning the sandbagged firing line into a skillet. Instructors paced like wolves, clipboards in hand, as recruits laid out their M2010 sleek modular beasts with Picatinny rails groaning under optics and suppressors. Lila knelt at her station, the last in line, and unpacked the ghost with deliberate calm, the rust flaking onto the mat like autumn leaves. Heads turned, murmurs rising like heat waves. "No way," someone breathed. Harlan, 2 stations down, snorted loud enough to carry. "Told you cosplay hour. Bet she can't hit the berm." Reyes arrived at 13:15, her boots kicking up red dust, a tablet in hand linked to the range's nascent AI diagnostic project Sentinel's beta, Whispers said, a system that learned from every shot, predicting drifts before they happened. But today was baseline quals, 500-meter pop-ups, no wind calls, pure mechanics. "Load and make safe," Reyes barked, and the line snapped to action. Lila's hands trembled just a fraction as she thumbed 5 rounds into the Springfield stripper clip, the brass glinting accusingly in the sun. The bolt slid home with a metallic sigh, and she shouldered it, the stock's rough grain biting into her cheek like an old friend's grip. Breathe in the pine-scented heat. Feel the noon sun on your neck like Abuelito's hand. Sight picture. Iron sights, pitted but true, framing the distant silhouette against the hazy tree line. Harlan fired first down the line, his M2010 cracking like thunder, pings echoing as targets flipped. 4 of 5 solid, the spotter called. Cheers rippled. Lila's turn came too soon, the sun now slanting low but fierce, shadows creeping like doubts. She squeezed, the rifle bucking with a report that rattled her teeth deeper, throatier than the modern pops, like a voice from the grave. The target stayed up. Miss. Whispers swelled. Second shot. Adjust for mirage. The heat waves teasing the barrel. Crack. Ping down. Third. Wind ghosting from the left. A noon breeze off the Chattahoochee whispering lies. She let it. Felt the rifle warm under her palm. That impossible pulse. Crack. Silence. Then the spotter's voice. Grudging. Up graze. Harlan's laugh cut sharp. Told ya. Rust bucket. That's what you get for fairy tales. Layla's cheeks burned hotter than the sun, but she held the fourth, sighting through the blur of sweat in her eyes. Abuelito's words echoed. It sees what you can't, mija, the target's soul flinching before the wind. Crack, ping, down clean. The line hushed. 5th shot. The target popped erratic, a mover at 600 now, the sun's glare haloing it like a challenge. Her finger curled, the world narrowing to the front sight's ghost, and crack the rifle sang, the pulse thrumming true. Ping, down. 3 of 5, the spotter announced, voice tinged with surprise. Not stellar, but no washout. Reyes strode over as the line cleared weapons, her shadow falling long across Lila's mat in the westering light. Not bad for scrap iron, Torres, but baseline's nothing wait till Sentinel rolls out tomorrow. It'll eat antiques for breakfast. Lila nodded, packing the Springfield with care, the metal still warm, almost alive. Harlan sauntered by, clapping slow and mocking. Lucky shots, chica. Tomorrow you versus the machine, my money's on silicon. The sun dipped toward the pines, the noon heat ebbing into evening promise. But Lila felt the curiosity ignite, a spark in her gut. What if the ghost had more to say? What secrets would it whisper when the AI's cold eye turned their way? As the platoon double-timed back to barracks, dust devils swirling in the dying light, Lila gripped the case tighter, the rifle's weight a question unanswered, pulling her into the suspense of what dawn and the relentless Georgia sun would demand next. The evening chow line snaked under strings of bare bulbs that buzzed like angry hornets. The mess hall, a cacophony of clattering trays and boasts from the day's qualls. Lila sat alone at the end of a scarred picnic table, poking at her rehydrated beans, the Springfield's case propped against her boot like a silent sentinel. The sun had surrendered the sky to twilight, but its heat lingered in her bones, a reminder of the judgment yet to come. Whispers slithered through the hall. Rust Bucket pulled 3, must have bribed the spotter. And Harlan held court at the center table, his squad hanging on tails of his 4-5s, the AI beta already syncing to his biometrics. Tomorrow's when it gets real, he crowed, voice carrying like shrapnel. Sentinel don't miss predicts the bullet's path before you blink. Poor Lila's ghost rifle? It'll be target practice for the bots. Laughter erupted, forks pausing midair. And Lila felt eyes on her, curious probes laced with pity. She kept her head down, but inside, the spark flickered brighter curiosity curdling into resolve. What if Harlan was wrong? What if the rifle's rust hit an edge sharper than any algorithm? Back in the barracks by 2000, the fans did little against the sticky dusk, bunks creaking as recruits crashed early for the morrow's grind. Lila waited until the snores settled, then slipped the case from under her mattress, the wood cool now in the dim glow of a contraband flashlight. Noon had tested it, but night would interrogate. She oiled the bolt again, fingers tracing the pitting like Braille secrets, and replayed the shots. The third, grazing because she'd second-guessed the wind. The fifth, true, because she'd trusted the pulse. Abuelito's face swam up, sun-lined and wise. From those Texas noons when he'd load her with 22s on a plinker range behind the barn. See, Misha, it don't need glass or gears. It knows you, your breath, your fear. Let it lead. But fear had teeth here, in this humid hive of alphas and egos. Harlan's bet pool hummed in the dark 50s, changing hands on her failure, and Reyes's warning echoed, Sentinel, the future, cold and unfeeling. What if the ghost failed her? What if its whispers were just wind? She dry-fired into the void, click after click, the action whispering promises in the still air. Outside, a Georgia thunderstorm rumbled distant, lightning cracking the night like muzzle flash. But Lila shot on, the curiosity building like static. By Zo 200, exhaustion claimed her. The rifle stowed once more. But sleep brought dreams of noon ranges under impossible sun's targets that moved like shadows. Harlan's laugh twisting into thunder, and the Springfield warming, urging her toward a shot that would silence them all. Dawn broke humid and bright at 0530. Reveille a clarion call, but the real judgment waited at 1100. Sentinel's unveiling, the AI's eye turning pitiless on the line. Lila rose with the platoon, the sun already climbing, and shouldered her duffel, the case's weight a talisman against the unknown. As they marched to formation, the heat building like suspense uncoiling, she wondered, would the ghost speak true, or would rust claim its final victim? The Georgia sun clawed its way to zenith by 1100 hours the next morning, turning Range 7 into a cauldron of red clay and unrelenting glare, the air so thick with humidity it felt like breathing through wet wool. Lila Torres marched in formation with the platoon, her boots sinking into the soft earth with each step, the Springfield's case slung over her shoulder like a cross she couldn't shake. The heat pressed down, a physical weight that made the world pulse and shimmer, mirages rising off the distant targets like ghosts, unwilling to stay buried. Yesterday's qualls had been a whisper of judgment, but today, Sentinel's debut promised a roar, the kind that could bury a recruit like her under an avalanche of doubt. Whispers had spread through the barracks like smoke from a suppressed barrel. The AI system wasn't just tech, it was the future. A neural net fed on terabytes of ballistic data, wind models, and shooter telemetry, designed to turn any grunt into a ghost. Harlan's voice had echoed in the pre-dawn dark, crowing to his cronies about syncing his vitals to it, like plugging into God's own scope. Lila's stomach knotted tighter than a field dressing, curiosity warring with the dread that the ghost rifle might finally go silent under such scrutiny. What if the rust flaked away her edge? What secrets would the noon sun burn out of her before she could prove them true? Reyes assembled them at the firing line by 11:30, her silhouette cutting sharp against the blazing sky, tablet in hand glowing with Sentinel's interface, a sleek holographic projector humming to life on a tripod, casting ethereal blue grids over the 800-meter markers. The platoon fanned out, M2010s at the ready, but eyes flicked to Lila like she was the odd round in the mag. Harlan, front and center, flashed a grin that didn't reach his eyes, his blonde buzz cut slick with sweat under the merciless light. "Morning, Rust Bucket. Sleep on those lucky shots? Sentinel here's gonna show you how real snipers play." The words hung in the still air, bait dangling for her to bite, but Layla just nodded, unpacking the Springfield with hands steady as the horizon. The metal warmed instantly in the sun, rust catching the light like flecks of old fire, and she felt that faint pulse again, a curiosity stirring in her chest, wondering if it sensed the challenge too. Reyes cleared her throat, voice slicing the murmurs like a bayonet. "Listen up. Project Sentinel. AI co-pilot for precision fire. Links to your scope, predicts drift, autocorrects. First drill paired shots. Human calls, AI confirms. Torres, your observer today. Watch and learn." Lila's jaw tightened, the sun baking the back of her neck as she stepped aside, the exclusion a subtle knife. Observer or outcast? As the line fired, cracks echoing like judgment bells, she scanned the ridge, the wind whispering faint lies through the pines, teasing her fingers to itch for the trigger. The first pairs went smooth as oiled rails. Harlan's station a showcase under the high noon blaze. His M2010 synced with a soft chime, the holographic grid overlaying his sight picture in augmented reality green lines, tracing bullet arcs before he even exhaled. "Target Alpha, 800 meters quartering wind," the AI's voice intoned, calm as a weatherman, adjusting his reticle with a whisper of servos. Crack, ping clean hit, the silhouette crumpling like paper in flame. Harlan pumped a fist, sweat flying, turning to the platoon with a wink. "See, machine's got my back. Next up, 900 with mover." The platoon buzzed, bets murmured low. 20s on Harlan topping the board, 5s trickling toward the antique washout pool. Lila watched from the shade of a sandbag revetment, the sun slanting harsh across her vision, curiosity gnawing like a loose round. How did it feel, that seamless marriage of man and machine? Her Springfield lay across her knees, barrel pointed skyward, and she traced its pitting idly, feeling the noon heat seep into the steel like blood into soil. Flashback flickered unbidden. Abuelito under a Texas high sun, the air wavy with heat, loading her tiny hands with .22 longs on a scrapwood range. Feel the winds whisper, Mika, not what it says, but what it hides. The rifle knows. It drinks the sweat from your brow and tastes the lie. She'd squeezed then, a tin can leaping at 50 yards, and he'd laughed, the sound booming over the cicadas. But here, in this mechanical ballet, what whispers could Rust compete with? By 12:30, the drill shifted to low-vis Sims smoke pots, belching gray veils across the range. the sun filtering through in hazy shafts that turned the world to a dream of half-seen threats. Reyes paired the recruits randomly, Lila finally drawing a slot with Pute Jamal Lee, a lanky tech whiz from Atlanta with fingers like spider legs and eyes that darted like code compiling. Jamal's M2010 was modded heavy extra batteries for the AI Link, a custom bipod that gleamed under the light, but his grin was easy, sweat beading on his dark skin as he bumped her shoulder. Heard about your ghost gun, Torres. Wild. I'm Jamal Hacker by night, grunt by, well, all day. You mind spotting while I sink? Lila shook her head, curiosity piqued by his lack of sneer, kneeling beside him as the smoke curled thicker, the noon sun dappling patterns on the ground like Morse code. Not at all, just don't let the machine do all the thinking. Jamal chuckled, the sound muffled by the haze, tapping his tablet to calibrate. Fair, but damn, it's spooky, predicts my flinch before I feel it. The first target popped at 700 meters, a fleeting shadow in the fog, and Jamal called windage, the AI overlay blooming in his HUD. Crack. Miss Graze, the round clipping edge. What the? Jamal muttered, the sun's heat making his uniform cling. Lila leaned in, her voice low over the distant pops. Wind shifting left smokes lying. Carrying Mirage, lead 500,000. Jamal adjusted, the AI chiming a scent, and fired again. Ping. Clean. He turned, eyes wide under the brim of his helmet. How'd you see that? Felt it more than saw. Lila shrugged, the Springfield's case warm against her thigh, a secret thrill building. Practice. Old school. As the sim dragged on, Jamal hit 80 under her calls, the two of them syncing like an unspoken team. But Lila's mind wandered to the rifle, curiosity burning hotter than the sun. What if she fed it her hunches, let the ghost cut through the machine's fog? Lunch hit at 1300 sharp, the mess tent a sweltering oven under camouflage netting that did nothing to blunt the noon assault. Flies buzzing over trays of lukewarm MREs like vultures at a kill. Lila sat with Jamal and a newcomer, Peart Sarah Klein, a pale medic from Ohio with anxious eyes and hands that fidgeted like they were stitching invisible wounds. Sarah had washed in from basic that morning, her uniform still creased, and she'd latched onto Jamal's easy vibe like a lifeline. Heard the bets are up to 200 on you flunking quals, Lila, Sarah said, voice a whisper over her chili mac, the sun slanting through the tent flap to spotlight her freckles. Harlan's running the pool, says your rifle's a joke. Lila forked a bite, the heat wilting her appetite, but curiosity sharpened her gaze. Let 'em bet. Seen worse odds. Jamal leaned in, wiping sweat with his sleeve, the tense shadows playing tricks on his face. Harlan's all talk top scores, but skips dry fire for Sims. You? That antique's got stories. Spill, what's its deal? The question hung, suspense coiling in the humid air, and Lila felt the pull, the noon light filtering gold through the canvas like a spotlight on her secrets. She glanced around Harlan's table across the way, his laugh booming as he tallied slips, then leaned closer. Family ghost. Great-grandpa carried it through Belleau Wood, said it pointed true when tech jammed. Dad took it to Iraq, saved him in a sandstorm once, or so the letters say. Sarah's eyes widened, fork paused midair. No way, like, intuitive? That's not in the manuals. Lila nodded, the words tasting like admission. Curiosity about their reactions mingling with the fear of exposure. Feels alive sometimes? Warms up, pulses like it's reading the wind with me. Jamal's grin split wide, the sun catching his teeth. Dude, that's gold. We should test it off books. After hours. The offer dangled, a thread of alliance in the enemy haze. But before Lila could reply, Harlan's shadow fell over the table, his tray slamming down uninvited. Talking fairy tales, Rust Bucket? Harlan drawled, the noon glare haloing him like a false saint, his boys flanking like hyenas. The tent hushed, forks scraping to a halt, suspense thickening the air like smoke from the range. Lila met his stare, the Springfield's phantom weight in her mind, curiosity flickering. What game was he playing now? Just history, Harlan. Something your AI can't download. He laughed, low and mean, leaning on the table so his shadow eclipsed her tray. History's for museums, Torres. Sentinel, it's evolution. Bet you a Benjamin you recycle by week's end antique versus algorithm no contest. The words landed like a challenge round, the platoon watching with bated breath, bets rustling in pockets. Sarah shrank back, Jamal's jaw set, but Layla held steady, the sun's heat fueling a slow burn in her veins. You're on, but when the ghost wins, you polish it yourself. Harlan's eyes narrowed, curiosity flashing in their depths. Did she just call his bluff? Before he straightened, tossing a crumpled bill on her tray. Deal. See you at afternoon quals, sweetheart. He sauntered off, the tent exhaling, but the seed was planted, suspense rooting deep. What if she pushed the rifle harder? What edges hid in its rust that silicon couldn't touch? Afternoon quals kicked off at 1400 under a sun that hadn't relented, baking the firing line into a forge where doubts melted and reformed as resolve. Reyes had upped the ante 800-meter unknowns. Partial exposures and gusting crosswinds that toyed with the smoke veils, like a cat with yarn. Lila drew lane 4. The Springfield laid out under the glare, its barrel soaking the light like a sponge for secrets. Harlan fired first adjacent, his AI humming approvals, cracking off hits with mechanical poetry. 95 clean, the hollow grid dancing in approval. Told you future's here, he yelled over the reports, sweat gleaming on his arms. Lila loaded her stripper clip, the brass hot from the sun-baked pouch, and shouldered the ghost, the stock's grain rough against her cheek, like Abuelito's calloused palm. Breathe the heat, taste the pine-laced wind, whisper your lies, old friend, and I'll listen. First target, fleeting torso at 850, wind quartering sneaky from the ridge. The iron sights blurred in the haze, no HUD to cheat, just gut and pulse. Crack! The rifle bucked, deeper than the M23010's snap, and the distant ping sang sweet. 1. Harlan glanced over, smirk faltering. Second, headshot pop-up, obscured by a gust-whipped veil, the sun's ray piercing like a laser. She felt it, the barrel's warmth spreading, urging her lead a hair right. Crack! Ping clean through the swirl. Gasps rippled down the line. Third, mover at 900, erratic in the thermals, mirage playing havoc. Harlan missed his parallel, cursing as the AI recalibrated mid-breath. Lila exhaled slow, the noon wind's whisper curling around her ear like a conspirator's breath. Squeeze. Crack. The silhouette jerked down, 80 hit zone. The spotter's voice carried, laced with wonder. Torres, 3 for 3! What the hell? The line buzzed as she cycled the bolt, the Springfield's action slick now, almost eager. Curiosity flooding her like cool water. What was it reading in her? Or the wind that the machines missed? Reyes strode up as the drill paused for resupply, her boots kicking dust devils in the fading glare, eyes sharp under the brim. Torres, a word. She pulled Lila aside to the revetment's shadow. The sun still high but tipping west, casting long, suspenseful fingers across the range. That wasn't luck. You're calling wind like a vet, how? Lila hesitated, the rifle slung warm across her back, the weight a comfort in the scrutiny. Gunny, it's the rifle. Feels it. Like Abuelito said, whispers the shot. Reyes's face softened a fraction, the iron cracking to reveal lines etched by her own noons in the desert. Tech's a tool, not a crutch, Private. But this? She nodded at the Springfield, curiosity mirroring Lila's own. Prove it tomorrow, full hybrid sim. Sentinel's watching. The words hung, a gauntlet thrown, as Reyes walked off, leaving Lila in the heat's embrace, heart pounding with questions. Could the ghost outpace the future? What would it demand of her when the algorithms turned hungry? Word of the hits spread like wildfire through evening formation. The sun, a bloated orange orb, sinking slow. But the barracks simmered hotter with resentment. Lila racked her gear by 1800, the fluorescent hum mocking the day's blaze, only to find her locker defaced "Rust Fail" scrawled in boot polish across the door, Harlan's handiwork clear as a muzzle flash. Sarah hovered nearby, wringing her hands, while Jamal scrubbed at it with a rag, his face thunderous. Bastards, pool's at 300 now, Harlan's riling 'em up, saying you're cheating with witchcraft. Lila's fists clenched, the Springfield case under her bunk calling like a siren's song, curiosity twisting to anger what prank next, sabotaged rounds. But Sarah's whisper cut through. Heard him in the head planning something for night shoot. Watch your ammo. The warning landed heavy, suspense coiling overnight like a spring trap. Lila lying awake in the sticky dark, the day's noon echoes replaying, pings in the haze, Harlan's falter, Reyes's gaze. By 2200, the platoon mustered for the night qual low-light movers under floodlights that paled against memory's sun, but Lila's rounds came up short, duds hissing wide, the rifle jamming on the third. What the? She muttered, the bolt stubborn, sabotage's stink rising. Spotter called misses, Harlan's laugh slicing the night. And Reyes hauled her offline, voice low thunder. Torres, explain. Heart hammering, Lila worked the action under the harsh beams, prying a wax plug from the chamber prank confirmed. Sabotage, Gunny, but I can... Reyes cut her, eyes flashing. Recycle tomorrow or fight it? The question suspended. Curiosity a knife's edge. What proof could Rust offer against the tide? Dawn broke humid at 0600, but the real noon waited. The sun climbing to judge as Lila faced the recycling board by 1100. The Springfield clutched like a plea. Harlan smirked from the platoon ranks. Bets tallied, but Reyes's voice boomed. Torres requests demo human versus ghost. The board paused, curiosity rippling, and granted it full sun, 1,000 meters, no aids. As the line formed, the heat building to zenith, Lila shouldered the rifle, pulse sinking with its warmth, whispers rising on the wind. Prove me, mija. The first crack echoed, suspense shattering into ping hit. Harlan's face drained, the platoon leaning in, the noon sun bearing witness to the ghost's awakening. The noon sun of that Georgia Tuesday in 2022 beat down on Range 9 like a prosecutor's gavel, turning the firing line into a crucible where sweat evaporated before it could fall, leaving salt-rimmed doubts etched on every brow. It was 11:30 hours, the air a heavy soup of pine sap and cordite residue from the morning's warm-ups, and Lila Torres felt the weight of 100 eyes boring into her back as she knelt at the demo station, the Springfield's case open like a confessional. The demo Reyes's grudging concession after the sabotage scandal had ballooned overnight into a platoon spectacle, brass from the sniper school HQ summoned by whispers of that antique girl challenging the future. Harlan's bet pool had swelled to 400, slips changing hands in the pre-dawn chow line like contraband smokes, his smirk a permanent fixture under the climbing sun. Lila's fingers, slick despite the heat, worked the bolt with ritual care, the rust flaking in fine red dust that caught the light like embers from a dying fire. Curiosity clawed at her insides. What would the ghost reveal under this glare? Would the AI's cold gaze sink to every breath? Would it pulse true, or betray her like the dud rounds of last night? The platoon formed a ragged semicircle behind the sandbags, shadows pooling short and sharp at high noon, their murmurs a low buzz that set her teeth on edge. Reyes stood equidistant, tablet in one hand, the holographic projector in the other, her face a mask of professional neutrality that hid the flicker of intrigue Lila had glimpsed in the revetment's shade. Torres, Harlan front and center, Reyes barked, her voice cutting the haze like a knife through fog. Full hybrid, 1,000 meters, variables live. Sentinel on Harlan, manual on Torres, no reshoots. Brass is watching. Lila rose, shouldering the Springfield, its stock warming against her cheek like a fevered touch. and met Harlan's stare across the line. His M2010 gleamed pristine, the AI module a matte black nodule on the rail humming faintly, already linking to his vitals via a wristband that pulsed green. "Ready to eat rust, Rust Bucket?" he drawled, the sun haloing his blonde head like a false prophet. Lila didn't bite, but inside, suspense coiled tighter than a jammed extractor. What if the rifle chose this moment to go silent? The targets arrayed at 1,000 meters were no joke. A gauntlet of pop-ups and movers on the ridge's spine, shrouded in programmed smoke bursts that the noon thermals twisted into serpentine lies, wind gusts clocking 10 knots from the southwest with sneaky shears at elevation. Reyes synced the chrono on her tablet, the hollow grid blooming overhead in azure lines that mapped arcs invisible to the naked eye. Targets hot in 3, 2, 1. The first silhouette jerked up at dead center, torso exposure partial behind a mock boulder, the sun's glare off the clay turning it to a shimmering phantom. Harlan moved first by draw, his rifle shouldering fluid as water, the AI chiming a soft affirmative in his earpiece HUD, overlaying predictive dope. Elevation 12.3 mils, wind hold 1.2 left. He exhaled, the system auto-tweaking his reticle with a microservo whine, and cracked off the shot. The report echoed flat in the heat, a ping confirming center mass before the echo faded. "Hit!" The spotter droned from the ridge bunker, voice tinny over the radio. Harlan lowered his weapon a fraction, turning to Lila with a wink that didn't mask the sweat beading on his upper lip. "Your turn, museum. Clock's ticking." Lila's pulse thrummed in her ears, the Springfield's barrel drinking the sun like a thirsting beast, and she settled into prone, bipod legs sinking into the soft berm. No grid, no chime, just iron sights pitted by time, framing the target through a veil of haze that danced like heat devils from hell. Breathe the wind's breath. Mija feel its lie in the smoke's curl. The pulse came faint at first, a vibration under her palm as if the rifle stirred from slumber, urging her finger steady. She led the gust by gut, squeezing smooth. Crack, the deeper thunder of the old action rolled out, distinct from Harlan's snap, and the distant ping pierced the suspense like a revelation. "Hit," the spotter intoned, a pause hanging heavy. Whispers rippled through the semicircle. "No way manual at a grand?" Lila cycled the bolt, brass ejecting hot into the dust, curiosity flooding her veins like adrenaline. What had the ghost seen that the machine merely calculated? Harlan's second target erupted at 1050, a mover tracking left to right in erratic bursts, the sun casting long shadows that played tricks on the optics. His AI adapted seamless, neural net crunching real-time data from embedded anemometers. Doppler shift detected hold 0.8 right. Coriolis compensated. Crack. Ping grazing the edge, but scored. He cursed under his breath, the sun baking the back of his neck, but recovered with a grin for the brass. "Close one system's learning my style." The platoon nodded, bets shifting subtly. But Lila felt the shift too, the air thickening with unspoken questions. Her turn. The same mover, now ghosting through a fresh smoke pot that the noon updrafts twisted into a gray vortex. Mirage rippling the silhouette like water over hot coals. Harlan leaned in from his lane, voice low venom. "Bet that rust can't track motion, watch it whiff." The taunt landed light, but suspense gripped Lila's chest, her squad Jamal and Sarah hovering at the edge, leaning forward with bated breath. She tracked the target in her mind's eye first, the Springfield's warmth spreading up the stalk like a conspirator's hand, pulsing in time with the gust she felt on her skin. No data feed, just the whisper. Lead 2 mils. Feel the shear at 900, squeeze, crack. The ping came crisp, center kill. "Dead on," the spotter confirmed, and the murmurs swelled to a wave, Sarah's gasp audible, Jamal's fist pumping silent. Reyes's tablet beeped, logging the metrics, her eyes flicking to Lila with a curiosity that mirrored the growing storm in the platoon. What edge did Rust hold over wires? Harlan's face tightened. the sun's glare sharpening his scowl as he loaded his third. By 12:30, the demo had stretched into a duel under the unrelenting noon blaze, 5 targets down, and the brass 2 colonels in starched tans, clipboards shielding their faces muttering into radios about anomalous variants. Harlan's AI was poetry in code, 90 hits, the hollow grid evolving with each shot, adapting to his trigger flinch, even suggesting breath holds via haptic buzz. But cracks showed the 4th target, a high-angle oblique through layered thermals, where the machine overcorrected for a phantom gust, round sailing high by a plate. Recalibrating, the AI intoned coolly. But Harlan slammed the mag home harder, sweat stinging his eyes. Damn glitch sun's messing the sensors. Lila's shots, though, wove a different spell. No recalibration, just the rifle's insistent pulse guiding her through the chaos. Hits landing at 92, a near impossible 1050 headshot on the 5th. The mover's shadow flickering like a bad dream in the haze. The platoon pressed closer, the sun baking their boots into the clay, curiosity electric in the air. "How's she calling it clean?" someone breathed. Jamal sidled up during the water break, passing her a canteen under the merciless light, his voice a urgent whisper. "Torres. That's not just skill, it's spooky." Felt the wind shift before the smoke even curled. "What's the rifle doing?" Lila gulped the tepid water, the Springfield propped beside her like a dozing sentinel, its barrel still radiating faint heat. Flashback hit mid-swallow. A Texas noon in 19, Abuelito's ranch under a sky like hammered brass. The two of them prone on a sun-scorched ridge, sighting jackrabbits at 400 yards with the ghost. "It drinks your doubt, Mija turns it to fire, but only if you trust the whisper over your eyes." She'd missed the first, frustration hot as the ground, but the second the rifle warmed, pulsed, and the jack leaped no more. Back now, she wiped her mouth. Curiosity about Jamal's faith mingling with the suspense of the brass's gaze. "It's family. Reads the patterns machines miss the human mess in the math." Sarah joined them, her medic kit slung low, eyes wide as saucers. "They're betting against you harder now, Harlan up the pot. But if you keep this up..." The sentence trailed, heavy with what-ifs, as Reyes called them back, the sun tipping imperceptibly west, but no less fierce. The 6th target loomed at 1100, a cluster of partials in a wind tunnel sim fans, whirring gusts up to 15 knots, smoke and chaff deploying in randomized bursts that turned the ridge into a sorcerer's cauldron. Harlan fired first, the AI's grid fracturing briefly under the shear, predictive lines stuttering like a glitched screen. "Anomaly manual override?" it queried, but he pushed through, cracking 2 hits from 3, the third grazing wide as a fan blade whipped the smoke. "Close enough," he growled, but the brass scribbled notes, the noon light glinting off their pens like accusations. Lila's heart hammered as she took the lane, the platoon now a full cordon, breaths held collective in the heat. Harlan leaned on his bipod, feigning casual. "When's a bitch today your ghost got prayers for that?" The taunt was bait, suspense ratcheting as she prone out, the Springfield sights aligning through a chaff blizzard that clawed at her focus. The pulse came stronger now, insistent, like a vein throbbing under the stock lead, the cluster low. Feel the tunnel's echo in the barrel. First shot, crack ping, lead partial down. Second, the wind sheared vicious, smoke coiling like a noose, but the rifle warmed fiercer, whispering hold steady through the blur. Squeeze, ping center. Third, the final silhouette ghosted erratic, sun-dappled and mocking. Harlan's whisper carrying, "Miss it! Rust bucket proved me right." Lila's finger hovered, curiosity piquing what lie hid in this gust. What soul did the ghost see flinching? The pulse surged, guiding true. Crack, triple ping. The spotter's voice cracked over radio. "Torres 3 for 3, Harlan 2. Silence fell, broken only by the fan's whine and the sun's silent judgment, the platoon erupting in a mix of whoops and stunned oaths. Reyes lowered her tablet, eyes locking on Lila's with unmasked intrigue. Metrics don't lie, Torres. 95 intuitive adjustment, no aids. Brass wants a debrief. Harlan straightened slow, face ashen under the glare, his AI module flickering errant as if offended. Bullshit must be a glitch in the spotter. But the curiosity in his eyes betrayed him. What had she tapped that his future couldn't touch? Debrief dragged under the mess tent's sagging canopy at 13:30, the noon sun filtering through in mottled shafts that patterned the folding table like sniper grids, the air thick with the tang of reheated coffee and unspoken reckonings. The brass Colerne Elias Grant, a silver-haired lifer with eyes like rangefinders, and his aide, Maj, Lena Voss, sharp-featured and notebook-fierce flanked Reyes, while Lila stood at attention, the Springfield case at her feet, like an accused witness. Harlan loomed opposite, arms crossed, the heat wilting his uniform but not his scowl. Grant cleared his throat, the sound amplified in the hush. Torres, your hits defy the data manual at 1,000 plus in variables. Sentinel's beta clock's 92 under ideal. You're edging it raw. Voss leaned in, pen poised, curiosity veiling her scrutiny. Break it down, wind calls. Sight picture? No hunch work? Lila met their stares, the sun's rays slanting across her face like a spotlight, suspense thrumming in the tense confines. Gunny, it's the rifle feels the shot. Wind's not numbers, it's alive. Gusts lie, but this reads the truth behind. Murmurs from the peanut gallery. Jamal nodding fervent, Sarah biting her lips swelled, but Grant waved them silent, his gaze drifting to the case. Open it. Lila complied, the hinges creaking like old bones, the Springfield laid bare in the light, rust a map of forgotten wars. Voss traced the stock scars with a gloved finger, intrigue blooming. Heirloom? Specs? 1903 Springfield, Sir Bello Wood vet. Dad carried it Iraq. Said it saved him when tech ghosted. Harlan snorted from his corner. Superstition, my miss, was a sensor bloom from the sun. Run it again. Controlled. Grant's eyebrow arched, the noon hush pressing. Tomorrow dawn quals, hybrid head-to-head, Torres vs. Harlan, full variables. If the ghost holds, we integrate it for study. The words landed like a primed round, suspense exploding outward, Jamal's grin splitting, Sarah's relieved exhale, Harlan's fists whitening. Lila nodded, closing the case with a click that echoed final, but inside questions swirled. What demand would the rifle make next? Could rust outrun the wires, or would the sun expose its final bluff? Afternoon bled into a forced march under the westering sun, the platoon humping 5 clicks through pine thickets that clawed at sleeves like jealous ghosts, the heat a relentless companion that turned every step into a test of will. Lila fell in with Jamal and Sarah at the rear, the Springfield case bouncing against her ruck, its presence a magnet for sidelong glances. You're a legend now, Jamal panted, wiping sweat from his brow, the sun dappling gold through the canopy. But Harlan's plotting overheard him griping to his crew about proving the glitch. Sarah nodded, her pack straps chafing red. Pool's split half on you now, but what if the brass mods your rifle, turns it into, I don't know, a hybrid? The notion hung, curiosity laced with dread, as Lila adjusted her strap, the case's weight at anchor in the sway. Flashback surfaced mid-stride, Iraq letters from Dad, postmarked under desert noons, his scrawl hasty. Ghost kept me alive today, kiddo sandstorm hit, GPS flatlined, but the old man pointed home. Trust it like me. She'd read them by Texas lamplight, the words a lifeline after his loss, fueling her enlistment. Now, with the demo's echo still ringing, she wondered what if the ghost demanded more than trust. What buried pattern would it unearth when the head-to-head dawned? The march ended at 1600 in the grinder, push-ups under the dying light, but suspense lingered like heat haze. Harlan's glare across the formation a promise of storms. Barracks by 1800 simmered with the day's residue, fans whirring futile against the trapped warmth, recruits clustering in knots to dissect the demo like ballistics reports. Lila claimed her bunk, the Springfield stowed but calling, and Sarah perched on the edge, voice low. Reyes pulled me aside, says the brass is curious about your intuitive baseline. Want psych evals tomorrow? Jamal slid in opposite, cracking a pilfered energy bar. Evals? Like mind reading? Dude, if they scan that rifle... Laughter bubbled, but Lila's smile faltered. The sun's ghost in the window mocking her. Curiosity piqued what neural whisper synced her to the ghost. And could evals expose it as fraud? Harlan's shadow fell then, tray in hand, the barracks falling pin drop. Congrats on the pity hits, Torres, but Dawn, I'll bury that relic. He dropped a sabotaged round wax plug like last night's on her mattress, the clink a gauntlet. Insurance. The barracks tensed, suspense crackling, but Lila palmed it cool, meeting his eyes. Keep your tricks, Harlan, the ghost doesn't need 'em. He sauntered off, laughter trailing, but the seed rooted. What counter would Rust play at first light? As taps sounded at 2100, Lila lay staring at the ceiling fan's blur, the day's noon pings replaying. Questions swirling into dreams of whispering winds and unraveling wires. Dawn cracked humid at 0530, but the true noon of judgment waited, the sun climbing to zenith as the head-to-head mustered at 1100 on range 10, a sprawling kill zone laced with drone decoys and thermal mirages that turned the air to illusion. Lila unpacked under the blaze, the Springfield pulsing eager, while Harlan synced his AI with a curse, the module glitching faint. Reyes counted down, brass perched in AC blinds, and the first crack split the suspense. Harlan's miss in the sheer, Lila's ping true, the duel dragged, hits mounting 4-3 her favor by 1200, the platoon a fevered crowd, curiosity a living thing. But on the 8th, a drone mover at 1200 wind howling lies, the rifle warmed volcanic, pulse hammering a warning. Wait, Misha, the shadow hides a trap. Lila held, squeezing late crack ping down. Harlan's shot followed, AI confident, but the drone veered programmed erratic, round whiffing wide. System error, he roared, the sun's heat fueling his rage. Reyes called halt at 1300, metrics flashing. Lila 7-1. The brass rose, Voss's voice carrying, Torres the ghost integrates, study it! Cheers erupted, Harlan storming off. But Lila knelt alone in the dust, the rifle cooling slow, whispers fading. What price for this victory? And what curiosity would the wires demand in return? The Georgia sun crested its merciless arc at precisely 1200 hours the following day, transforming range 11 into a blistering anvil, where the red clay radiated heat like the heart of a forge, every breath a labored pull through air thick enough to chew. Lila Torres wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her forearm, the salt stinging her eyes as she prone out on the firing mat, the Springfield's barrel already scorching under the noon assault, its rust a mottled camouflage against the baked earth. The head-to-head demo's triumph from yesterday lingered like gunsmoke in the platoon whispers of Ghost Girl chasing her through the chow lines, bets flipping in her favor overnight. But victory's afterglow had curdled into something sharper, a suspense that coiled in her gut like a live round chambered too tight. The brass's order to integrate the ghost meant scrutiny now, not celebration. Psych evals at 1000 had poked at her baseline's reaction times, pattern recognition scans under fluorescent glare that mimicked the sun's probe, leaving her feeling dissected. Questions unanswered about why the rifle synced to her pulse like a second heartbeat. What neural quirk made her read the wind's lies when algorithms faltered? And Harlan, his glare across the morning formation, a promise of payback. The sabotaged round from last night, just the opening salvo in whatever shadow war he brewed under the relentless light. Reyes had pulled her aside post-eval, voice low in the humid shade of the HQ tent. They're fast-tracking you to hybrid trials, Torres. But watch your six Harlan's egos a loose cannon, and the brass wants results, not relics. Lila nodded then, the sun slanting through the canvas like accusatory fingers. But now, with the platoon arrayed for the afternoon's adaptive quals, curiosity gnawed deeper. What new variables would the ghost face today? And what hidden flaw in the wires would it expose before Harlan could bury her? Reyes paced the line at 12:15, her boots kicking up dust devils that swirled lazy in the still air. Tablet synced to the expanded Sentinel network, a web of sensors now dotted along the ridge, feeding live data to every rifle in play. The quals had evolved overnight. Not just paired shots, but swarm sims drone decoys swarming at 900 meters, thermal blooms mimicking enemy heat sigs, wind shears programmed to mimic Korangal's treacherous drafts. Harlan fronted lane 1, his M2010 modded heavier with the latest beta nodule, the AI's haptic cuff buzzing faint on his wrist like an impatient lover. He'd arrived early, sinking under the climbing sun, but Lila caught the glitch a stutter in the hologrid as it calibrated, the noon thermals playing havoc with the optics. "System nominal," the AI intoned in his ear, but Harlan's jaw ticked, sweat carving tracks down his temples. He shot her a look across the lanes, eyes narrowed to slits against the glare. "Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts, Rust Bucket. Swarms where machines eat ghosts." The taunt landed light, but suspense laced it. Rumors swirled from the evils that he'd petitioned the brass for a fairness review, claiming her hits were unverifiable anomalies. Lila unpacked the Springfield with deliberate calm, the metal sighing as it warmed, its pulse a subtle thrum under her palm that set her curiosity alight. Did it sense the drones already? Those mechanical birds hovering silent in the haze? Or was it feeding on her doubt, urging her to trust the whisper over the wine? Jamal and Sarah flanked her station, their presence a quiet bulwark. Jamal fiddling with a scavenged tablet to log off book metrics. Sarah scanning the ridge with binoculars, her medic's eyes spotting Harlan's crew lingering too close to the ammo crates. "Load and scan!" Reyes bellowed, and the line snapped taut, rifles shouldering in unison under the zenith's blaze. The first swarm erupted at 1220, a flock of 6 quadcopters, matte black phantoms dipping through programmed gusts, their faux heat sigs blooming erratic on the sensors like fever dreams. Harlan's AI lit up first, grid fracturing the sky into predictive webs. Targets acquired priority alpha, hold 2.1 mils, evasive vector compensated. His M2010 barked in controlled bursts, suppressors whispering the cracks into muffled thuds, pings registering 2 down in the first wave, rotors shredding in midair cascades. The platoon leaned in, breaths held against the heat, but Lila watched closer. The third drone veered unpredicted, a sheer wind bucking it left where the grid held straight. Harlan's follow-up grazing harmless. "Recalibrating environmental spike," the AI murmured, and he cursed, cycling the bolt with force that echoed his frustration. "Damn sun's frying the feeds!" 2 more down on his second string, but the swarm adapted, dipping lower into the thermals, the noon light turning their silhouettes to flickering wraiths. Lila's turn came with the clock ticking merciless, the drones now at 950, chaff deploying in glittering clouds that clawed at the eyes. No grid for her, just the Springfield's iron ghosts framing the chaos, the barrel's warmth spreading like a warning. "Feel them. Misha, their hum's a lie. The wind carries their fear." The pulse surged, sinking to the flock's rhythm, and she squeezed on the lead bird, leading the sheer by instinct alone. Crack the deeper report rolled out, distinct in the din, and a ping sang as rotors exploded in a puff of smoke. 1. Harlan twisted, his shot tagging a decoy wide as the AI stuttered again. Lila tracked seamless, the rifle urging her next second drone, dipping erratic. Crack, ping down, the chaff parting like a veil. The platoon murmured, suspense building like thunderheads on the horizon. "How's she threading that?" Sarah whispered, binoculars trembling in her grip. Third, the swarm tightened, a thermal bloom masking the prime. But the ghost warmed volcanic, pulse hammering a path through the lie. Squeeze, crack, triple ping. "Torres 3 of 3, the spotter crackled, and Reyes's tablet beeped metrics that defied the screen. 100 intuitive hits, 0 drift. By 12:45, the quals had devolved into a fevered relay under the unyielding noon sun, rotations blurring as drones respawned in endless waves, the ridge a hornet's nest of whirring death. Harlan pushed hard, his AI evolving mid-drill neural net gobbling data from the misses, haptics, buzzing corrections that bordered on prescient, but the glitches mounted, sensors blooming false from the heat shimmer, rounds sailing into the void more often than not. "Override accepted manual hold," the system yielded on his sixth string, frustration etching his face deeper than the sweat. Lila, though, wove through unscathed, the Springfield's whispers sharpening with each cycle. Not the hum, the shadow's edge lead the ghost in the machine. Her hits clocked 85 clean, the rust no hindrance in the blaze, curiosity blooming wild in her chest. What pattern did the rifle see in the swarm that Silicon chased but never caught? Jamal logged it frantic on his tablet during a water halt, the sun baking the canteen dry in his hand. "Torres, your wind calls are off the charts, beating the anemometers by seconds." "It's like the rifle's predicting." Sarah nodded, passing her a rag for the sweat, her voice a hushed thrill. "Harlan's crew's circling the crates again. Think they're spiking the drones next? To force a glitch on you." The warning prickled, suspense ratcheting as Lila glanced over Harlan's boys huddled casual under the glare, one palming a remote that caught the light wrong. What sabotage brewed now, and could the ghost outrun it? Reyes called rotation, her eyes flicking to the group with iron promise, but the seed rooted. Trust the pulse, or fall to the wire's trap. Lunch under the mess tent at 1300 offered no reprieve. The canvas sagging under the noon furnace, air trapped hot and stale with the reek of boiled franks and instant coffee. Lila sat wedged between Jamal and Sarah, tray balanced on knees, the Springfield case propped like a third wheel, its presence drawing stares from across the tables. Harlan held court opposite, voice booming over the clatter. "Anomalies, boys, her hits are smoke and mirrors. Wait till the hybrids drop, my wriggle ghost that relic proper." His crew laughed, but the undercurrent soured, eyes darting to Lila with a mix of awe and envy that set her skin crawling. The evil's echoes lingered too, Voss's probing questions replayed in her mind. Describe the pulse tactile or cognitive? Any family history of synesthesia? She'd hedged then, the fluorescent mimicking the sun's grill, but curiosity festered. Was it inheritance, abuelito's tales bleeding into her nerves, or something the rifle imprinted, a legacy etched in rust? Jamal leaned in, fork spearing a mystery lump, his whisper urgent over the din. "Hack the prelim logs your intuitive drifts 15 tighter than baseline humans. Brass is buzzing. Grant wants a full teardown on the Springfield Post quals." Sarah's eyes widened, glancing at Harlan's table where a remote vanished into a pocket. "Tear down. They'll strip it lose the ghost. And if they spike the Sims..." The half-said fear hung, suspense thickening the humid air, Lila's fork pausing midair as a shadow fell Reyes, tray in hand, sliding onto the bench uninvited. "Torres, a word on the swarm." Her voice was casual, but eyes sharp as bayonets, scanning the tent like a sweep for hostiles. Lila nodded, curiosity piqued by the gunny's rare sit-down, the sun slanting gold through the flap to spotlight Reyes's scars-faint lines from Gulf One's noons, etched deeper than words. "You called that sheer before the sensors pinged it. How?" Lila hesitated, the case's weight against her boot a anchor. The rifle, Gunny warms like it's alive, reads the wind's intent. Reyes chewed slow, gazed distant in the light, then leaned closer. I carried an old Garand in 91, saved my ass in a haboob when the optics fogged. Tech's king now, but ghosts? They win the close ones. Keep it close, but watch Harlan ego like his snaps under pressure. The warning landed heavy, Reyes rising with her tray, leaving Lila in the heat stew, questions swirling. What pressure would snap first? And what echo from the past would the rifle summon to meet it? Afternoon rotations resumed at 1400. The sun, a bloated tyrant tipping west, but no less brutal, baking the firing line into a delirium where doubts sharpened to razors. Lila drew the hybrid lane now brass mandated, a Frankenstein rig lashed to the Springfield, a basic anemometer clipped to the stock, feeding minimal data to a wrist tablet, the ghost's purity diluted but potent. Harlan synced opposite, his full Sentinel gleaming, but the glitches bit deeper, a drone swarm blooming false positives, his bursts chewing air as the AI overrode into frenzy. "Shut it manual!" he snarled, the noon wind mocking his sweat. Lila's hybrid hummed tentative, the tablet chiming windholds, but she trusted the pulse over the pixels, cracking hits that threaded the chaos. 4 of 5, the final drone crumpling mid-dive as the rifle warmed prophetic. The spotter's voice crackled awe. Torres edges it hybrid sync at 92. Harlan's face twisted storm dark, his rig smoking faint from overload. And as the line cleared, he stormed her station, remote clutched white-knuckled. "Freak luck your junk's glitching my feeds!" The accusation flew. Platoon freezing in the heat, suspense electric as Reyes interposed, hand on his chest. "Stow it! Harlan log says clean, or you want to explain the remote to the brass." His eyes flicked to Lila, curiosity warring with venom. What had she stirred that his future couldn't quell? Before he backed off, the remote vanishing. But the seed flowered. What counter would he unleash next? And could the ghost's whisper outpace the sabotage? By 1530, the qualls wrapped under the westering glare. Scores tallied with Lila topping the board, 88 to Harlan's 76. But victory tasted ash in the heat's afterburn. Jamal and Sarah walked her back, the pine shadows lengthening like fingers. But Lila's mind raced ahead. The teardown loomed at dusk, brass techs waiting with calipers and scanners, the rifle's secrets at risk. Flashback clawed up a Texas noon in '07. Dad's last leave, the two of them oiling the ghost under the barn's slant light, his voice gravel over the cicadas. "It chose me. Kids saved us in Fallujah when the dust blinded everything. It'll choose you, too, if you listen." She'd nodded then, 12 and fierce, but now, with the sun dipping low, curiosity burned. Chosen for what war, and what price would the wires exact to steal its voice? Harlan's shadow lingered distant, watching from the tree line, the remote's glint a final taunt. As the barracks loomed, fans whirring futile welcome, Lila gripped the case tighter, the pulse faint but insistent. "Hold, Mija, the noon ahead whispers of greater storms." The suspense settled bone deep, curiosity a spark in the dusk. What hybrid hell would dawn bring, and would rust endure the forge? The noon sun of midweek Georgia in 2022 hammered down on the assembly grounds like a blacksmith's mallet, forging the platoon into a sweat-slicked line under the flagpole's indifferent shadow. The air a palpable weight that pressed uniforms to skin and doubts to the surface. It was 1145 hours. The zenith's blaze turning the parade deck into a mirror of molten red clay that reflected distorted faces back at their owners. And Lila Torres stood at parade rest with the Springfield case clutched behind her back, like a concealed blade, its outline digging into her palm through the leather. The hybrid trial's edge from yesterday had ignited a firestorm scores leaked via anonymous barracks memos. Lila's 88 hovering over Harlan's like a taunt from the grave, and now the rivalry spilled into the open. Suspense crackling through the ranks like static before a storm. Reyes had called this motivational brief, but whispers from the evils painted it clearer. Brass pressure mounting, budget hawks circling Fort Moore with spreadsheets that pitted legacy systems against Sentinel's silicon promise. Whispers of cuts to human sniper slots if the AI proved dominant. Lila's ghost rifle, that improbable outlier, stood at the fulcrum curiosity from the techs, turning to covetous probes, their teardown postponed but looming like a guillotine. What fracture would it reveal in the machine's armor? And at what cost to her? Harlan, front and center as always, shifted his weight with feigned ease, but his eyes squinted against the glare locked on her like targeting lasers. The remote from yesterday's quail vanished, but its threat echoing. Jamal and Sarah flanked her subtle, their presence a threadbare net against the tide, but even they felt the pull, curiosity etching their faces. How long could rust defy the forge? Reyes strode to the podium at 1200 sharp, her boots echoing sharp on the deck, tablet in hand, casting a blue glow that warred with the sun's tyranny. The platoon snapped to attention, spines cracking like dry branches, but the undercurrent hummed bets now at 600, slips folded in pockets like illicit ammo. "Platoon!" Reyes began, voice a whip crack over the cicada drone. "Trials escalate tomorrow. Full chaos sims fog banks, rain rigs 1,200-meter unknowns. Sentinel's the benchmark. Humans adapt or adapt out." She paused, the sun slanting across her face to carve shadows like war paint, eyes sweeping to Harlan, then lingering on Lila. "And for the underdogs, prove the metrics wrong. Torres your hybrids live, Harlan full sync. Rest, observe, and log." The words landed neutral, but suspense bloomed in the silence, the platoon leaning imperceptibly, as Harlan stepped forward unbidden, his drawl slicing the heat like a hot knife. "Gunny, permission to address?" Reyes nodded curt, and he turned to the line, the noon light gilding his stance like a challenger's halo. "Rust versus the future, let's make it official. I bet my qual's bonus on Sentinel burying that antique by Sim's End. Who's in? Torres, you game? Or you hiding behind Grandma's tails?" Laughter rippled uneasy, the deck shimmering under the assault. But Lila felt the hook set, curiosity flaring hot in her chest. What game did he play now, baiting public to mask a deeper strike? The platoon stirred, hands dipping to pockets, voices murmuring odds. 2-1 on Harlan AI, don't flinch. Sarah's breath hitched beside her, Jamal's jaw set, but Lila stepped up, the case swinging forward like a declaration, her voice steady over the haze. "You're on, Eagle Eye, but when the ghost threads the fog, you owe more than polishful confession on the sabos." Gasps swelled, Reyes's eyebrow arching faint intrigue. And Harlan's grin faltered a heartbeat before hardening, the sun's glare sharpening the challenge. "Deal! Noon tomorrow, may the best tech win." The brief dissolved into a buzz, the platoon dispersing like smoke on the wind. But the gauntlet hung heavy, suspense rooting deep. What fracture in Harlan's hubris would the rifle pry open? And what curiosity would it demand of her in the fog's blind embrace? Afternoon bled into a frenzy under the unyielding sun, the platoon released to prep time that Lila seized like a lifeline, humping her gear to the auxiliary range, a forgotten stretch of burned earth on the post's fringe, where the pines clawed at the sky and the noon thermals twisted mirages into mocking specters. By 1330, she was prone in the dust, the Springfield laid out on a scrap poncho that flapped lazy in the gusts, its barrel baking the air around it like a ritual pyre. Jamal and Sarah trailed her, rucks dumped in the shade, curiosity drawing them into the orbit, Jamal with his tablet jury rigged to a drone feed, Sarah packing a medkit laced with energy gels and electrolyte tabs. "You're insane full sun, no shade," Sarah panted, dropping beside her, the heat wilting her ponytail into frizz. Lila oiled the bolt with a rag blackened from use, the sharp scent cutting the pine tang, her fingers tracing the pitting like a blind woman's braille. Ghost likes the forge sharpens in the fire. Watch! She shouldered the rifle, the stock's grain biting familiar into her cheek, and dry-fired at a phantom 1100, the click echoing hollow, but the pulse coming swift a thrum that synced her breath to the wind's subtle sheer. Crack imagined, but the curiosity ignited. What mod could she etch without betraying the soul? Jamal knelt opposite, tablet glowing as he patched into the range's simnet, his voice a eager rush over the sizzle. Pulled prelims from yesterday, your drift patterns? Non-linear, like jazz in the math. AI's all straight lines. You're improvising. Let me model it feed your calls, see if it predicts the ghost. Lila nodded, squeezing another dry pull, the sun's ray lancing through the sights like a vein of light. Do it, but minimal ghost ring from scrap, nothing wired. Sarah rummaged her kit, producing a length of filed-down bootlace and a lens from a busted chemlight, her hands steady despite the blaze. Here, crude rear sight won't glitch the pulse. As Jamal tapped code, curiosity coiling in his focus, Lila fired live thumbing rounds from a scavenged stripper clip, the reports rolling deep and true into the berm, pings singing from pop-ups she'd rigged with string and pulleys. One at 950, wind quartering sly. The rifle warmed, whispered lead half mil, and it dropped clean. Logged your hold beat the NM by 0.3 seconds, Jamal breathed, the sun dappling his screen in interference. But suspense shadowed the thrill. Harlan's taunt echoed, and distant, through the pines, a figure ghosted the tree line one of his crew, binoculars glinting brief. What eyes watched, and what leak in the sims would they plug to bury her tomorrow? By 1430, the prep had stretched into obsession under the westering but still fierce sun. Layla cycling through a dozen strings, the Springfield's action slick now with heat and oil, its pulse a steady drum that drowned the cicadas. Jamal's model hummed on the tablet, spitting graphs of her instinct arc's curves that looped where Sentinels spiked linear, curiosity lighting his eyes like code compiling true. It's fractal, Torres self-similar patterns in the chaos. Fog sims, AI chokes on variables, you dance 'em. Sarah patched a blister on Lila's trigger hand, her voice a soft prod over the reports. But why push? Harlan's unhinged saw him spiking his own sync earlier, like he's forcing the glitches. The revelation prickled, suspense tightening as Lila lowered the rifle, barrel steaming faint in the haze, her gaze flicking to the tree line where the watcher had vanished. Hubris skips the feel for the feed. Ghost sees it coming. Flashback clawed mid-breath. A Texas noon in 18. Abuelito's ranch under a sky like poured brass, the two of them modding the stock with boot knife and epoxy, his arthritic hands guiding hers. Don't chain it. Mija mods are scars, not shackles. Let it breathe the wind or it forgets the whisper. She'd nodded then. 16 and raw from Dad's anniversary, the rifle's pulse her anchor against the grief. Now, with Sarah's ghost ring filed crude from a spent casing, curiosity warred with caution. What scar would this etch? And would it sharpen or silence the soul? A crackle from Jamal's tablet shattered the rhythm range net alert. Intrusion ping, someone's probing the sim params. His fingers flew, tracing the hack to a barracks IP Harlan's rack. Bastard tweaking the fog density for tomorrow, wants to blind the manual lanes. Lila's jaw set, the sun's heat fueling a cold resolve, suspense coiling like barbed wire. What counter could Rust offer against coded sabotage? The tree line trek back at 1530 wound through pine corridors where the sun dappled gold and menace, shadows lengthening like fingers groping for secrets. Lila's squad a tight knot against the unseen eyes. Jamal patched a quick firewall on the fly, his tablet a shield in the glare, but curiosity festered. If he's rigging the sims, Brass'll sniff it, right? Sarah's optimism rang thin. Her medkit slung low as she scanned the underbrush. Lila gripped the case tighter, the Springfield's residual warmth a talisman. but the pulse fluttered erratic now, as if sensing the fracture ahead. External pressure whispered too. Overheard in the Aval's antechamber. Grant's voice gravel over a sat phone. Budget's tight. If Sentinel folds on chaos, human slots get the axe. Prove the machine or we're dinosaurs. The words echoed Abuelito's tales of doughboys outgunned by tanks. Rust their only edge. What if her ghost became the relic that saved them all or damned the line to obsolescence? As the barracks loomed, fans whirring futile against the trapped heat, Reyes intercepted them at the sally port, her shadow falling long in the slant light. Torres, my office, now. Jamal and Sarah peeled off with nods, curiosity etching their retreats, leaving Lila to follow into the dim cool of the gunny's sanctum. A Spartan box of file cabinets and faded unit photos under a single bulb that mimicked the sun's probe. Reyes closed the door at 1600, the latch clicking like a chambered round, and gestured to a scarred chair, her own sinking into the desk with a creak that spoke volumes. The air hung heavy, laced with coffee grounds and old sweat, the windows blind slanting noon remnants across maps pinned like flayed hides. Sit and spill the full ghost story. Brass is circling. I need to know if it's asset or liability. Lila perched, the case across her knees like a confessional, suspense thrumming in the confines. What truth would crack the Iron Mama's facade? She traced the stock's gouge, voice low over the fan's hum. Abuelito great-grandpa's rifle. Below wood survivor. Dad carried it a rock. Said it whispered through sandstorms when GPS ghosted. After he went, it was mine. Pulses like a vein reads the wind's lie. The targets flinch. Eval's caught the sink, but it's not me. It's us. Reyes leaned back, eyes distant in the half-light, a faint smile ghosting lips cracked by desert suns. Ghosts, huh? 91 Gulf 1, my old M16 jammed in a shamal, optics fogged blind. But my abuela's rosary, tucked in the stock? Warmed my palm, pointed true through the wall of sand. Saved my squad from an ambush. Brass called it luck, but I knew. The confession hung, curiosity bridging the gap. Reyes's scars a mirror to Lila's legacy. Bias back then, worse than Harlan's little Latina with a toy. Overcame it by outshooting the doubters, one noon at a time. Yours? It's stirring the pot budget cuts loom if Sentinel shines, but your metrics scream hybrid future. Confide in me. What's it demanding now? Lila hesitated, the pulse faint through the case, whispering of fog and fracture. Trust over tech, but Harlan's rigging hacks in the Sims. Reyes's face hardened, intrigue flashing to steel. Proof, Jamal's tablet log, forwarded quiet. Reyes scanned it, nodding grim. I'll bury it, but tomorrow, win the chaos, Torres, for the ghosts in the slots. The dismissal came soft, Reyes's hand on her shoulder a rare anchor, leaving Lila in the hall's humid dusk, questions swirling. What demand would the rifle voice in the fog, and what curiosity would Harlan's fracture reveal before the forge claimed one? Evening chow at 1800 simmered with the day's residue. The mess hall a cauldron of clattering trays and sidelong bets under fluorescence that paled against memory's blaze. Harlan's table a hive of murmurs where his remote vanished into a sleeve. Lila sat with her squad, picking at rehydrated stew, the case at her feet a silent sentinel, curiosity peaking as Jamal slid his tablet under the table. Firewalls holding Sims clean for now, but his tweaks amp the fog opacity 20 on manual lanes, once you blind. Sarah's fork clattered, eyes darting. Reyes, no. Lila nodded, the pulse steady now, a promise in the rust. She's got it, but the ghost? It'll see through. The words landed defiant, but suspense shadowed the table Harlan's gaze across the hall, locking brief and venomous, the sun's ghost in the window mocking the coming dawn. As taps loomed at 2100, Lila slipped to the head, splashing water that did nothing for the heat's cling, staring at her reflection fractured in the steel mirror. What vein of rust would hold in the chaos, and what code would crack first? Harlan's shadow fell then, door creaking, his voice a low hiss in the tile echo. Sleep tight, rust bucket. Fogs, my friend, your whispers drown in it. He vanished, the latch clicking judgment, leaving Lila in the drip-drip suspense, the pulse surging faint. Listen, Mija, the fracture calls. Midnight found her on the Oaks Range again, moon a pale noon proxy, modding the ghost ring by chemlight, curiosity a blade honing sharp. Tomorrow's zenith waited, fog banks rising like veils over the forge, the duel poised to shatter. Would rust thread the blind, or would the wires weave the final lie? The noon sun of that fateful Thursday in 2022 scorched the Chaos Sims on Range 12 like a vengeful deity, its white-hot gaze turning the valley into a vortex of steam and shadow, where the air itself seemed to boil, carrying the faint, acrid bite of fog machines priming in the underbrush. It was 11:45 hours. The zenith's fury baking the firing line into a delirium of red mirages and whispered doubts, and Lila Torres knelt in the prone trough of her lane, the Springfield's hybrid rig, a jury-rigged anemometer and ghost ring scarred by yesterday's mods, humming tentative against the rifle's pitted barrel, which drank the heat like a parched relic awakening. The official duel with Harlan had ignited overnight, barracks ablaze with contraband flyers scribbled in boot polish. Rust versus future noon showdown, bets close at dawn. $600 hung in the balance, but the real stakes loomed larger. Grant's brass hovering in the elevated blind, Voss's tablet logging every ping for the budget brief that could axe sniper slots or crown Sentinel king. Lila's pulse synced early to the rifle's thrum, a subtle vibration that prickled her skin like static before lightning, curiosity gnawing at its edges. What veil would the fog lift today, revealing fractures in Harlan's code or secrets in the ghost's vein? Reyes had greenlit the Sims at dawn, her voice gravel over the radio. Full chaos fog banks rolling at 1200, rain rigs dumping variables, no quarter. But whispers from Jamal's hack lingered Harlan's tweaks to the opacity, amped to blind the manual suspense coiling tighter than the wind shears the Sims promised. Jamal and Sarah shadowed her station, eyes darting to Harlan's lane, where his crew loitered casual by the control shack, remotes palmed like hidden frags. Fog's his playground, Jamal muttered, tablet shielded from the glare, his model from last night's prep spitting probabilistic ghosts. 72 chance of AI overload in the vortex. Sarah nodded, her medkit open for quick patches, voice a thread over the building hum. Reyes scrubbed the hack logs Harlan's on thin ice. But if he spikes the banks... The half-threat hung, curiosity flickering in her gaze. What desperate play would ego unleash when the veils fell? Reyes's whistle pierced the noon haze at 1200, sharp as a first round, and the line tautened, rifles shouldering in a symphony of clicks and breaths held against the furnace. The fog banks erupted first, a mechanical dawn of white vapor billowing from ridge vents, engineered to mimic Korangal's infamous murk, but laced with Harlan's opacity tweak, thickening to an opaque soup that swallowed the 1200-meter markers whole. Rain rigs followed, nozzles hissing overhead to dump recycled deluge that turned the clay to slurry, the sun's rays fracturing through like shattered glass, casting the world in prismatic lies. Harlan moved Alpha, his M2010 a sleek predator in the mist, Sentinel's nodule glowing fierce as it crunched the feeds. Fog density 87 thermal bloom adjusted, hold 3.4 mils, precipitation compensated. His bursts cracked muffled through the veil, suppressors threading needles in the gray, pings registering faint but true two-movers down in the initial wave, silhouettes crumpling like wet paper. The platoon pressed the berm's lip, breaths fogging their own view. But Lila caught the stutter the AI's grid flickering errant on his HUD projection, a bloom from the rain's refractive chaos overloading the sensors. "Recall affirmative," the system intoned. but Harlan's curse sliced low, sweat and slurry streaking his face as his third shot whiffed into the void, the fog curling mocking around the miss. Damn variables pushing manual! He cycled hard, the noon deluge plastering his uniform. But the blind's brass leaned forward, Voss's pen scratching furious. Lila's heart thundered, the Springfield's pulse surging insistent now, a heat deeper than the sun's that urged her into the prone, iron sights vanishing into the white. No grid pierced this veil, just the ghost's whisper, faint through the downpour. Feel the rain's rhythm. Mija, the droplets lie, but the wind cuts true beneath. She squeezed on the lead shadow, leading the sheer by the pulse's tug. Crack, the report boomed thunderous in the murk, distinct from Harlan's snaps, and a ping echoed wet and final. 1. Harlan twisted mid-reload, his glare cutting the fog like a challenge, suspense electric in the slurry. What fracture hid in his frenzy? And would the ghost thread the vortex unscathed? By 12:20, the Sims had spiraled into a maelstrom under the unrelenting noon assault. Fog banks respawning in rolling waves that choked the ridge. Rain sheeting horizontal in gusts clocked at 20 knots, turning the firing line into a quagmire where boots sucked and slipped like accusations. Harlan adapted fierce, his AI evolving mid-chaos neural net, gobbling the downpour's data. Haptics buzzing overrides that bordered on clairvoyant, but the fractures widened, sensors fogging with condensate, predictive arcs stuttering into ghosts of their own. Anomaly Cascade Priority Manual, the system yielded on his fourth string, a cluster of 5 unknowns ghosting at 1150, and he fired raw, cracking 3 hits through sheer will, the pings muddled but scored. The platoon murmured awe, bets rustling in sodden pockets. But Lila saw the toll Harlan's hands trembling faint on the foregrip, the remote in his offhand palm slick, thumb hovering like a detonator. Her turn wove the suspense tighter. The same cluster, now veiled thicker by his tweak, rain lashing her scopeless sights into blur, the sun's fractured light dappling the murk like false stars. Jamal leaned close, voice lost in the roar. Model says 65 blind, trust the pulse. Sarah swabbed her brow, eyes wide on the blind where Grant's silhouette stiffened. Lila exhaled the deluge from her lungs, the Springfield's warmth volcanic now, pulsing a path through the lie the rain's cadence masking a micro-shear, wind whispering low and lethal. Squeeze, crack, ping lead unknown down, the fog parting brief like a sigh. Second, a mover darted erratic, thermal bloom flickering phantom in the haze. The pulse hammered, urging hold steady through the veil. Crack, double ping. Harlan's burst overlapped, tagging one wide as his AI glitched anew, the grid fracturing into static snow. Override failed rebooting, it barked, and his face twisted storm-ravaged. The remote's button depressed subtle in the chaos. Third, the cluster tightened, rain veiling the prime in a curtain of deceit, but the ghost surged prophetic, warmth spreading to her trigger finger like a vein of fire. Lila led the flinch she felt in the wind's breath, squeezing true, crack, triple ping. Torres 3 of 3, the spotter crackled through static, and the berm erupted in soaked whoops, Reyes's whistle cutting short as Voss's voice boomed from the blind. Metrics live Torres leading 5-3. Continue! The duel dragged into a fever by 12:45. The noon sun, a distant tyrant, filtered through the vortex, its heat trapped in the fog, to steam the air into a sauna of suspense, where every ping echoed like a heartbeat in the dark. Harlan rallied savage, ditching the AI mid-string for pure gut, cracking a 1180 headshot through a rain-lash gap that drew brass nods, but the glitches compounded. His nodule overheating in the slurry, haptics buzzing erratic warnings that frayed his focus. "It's the damn fog your tweaks, Harlan," one of his crew hissed low, caught on the platoon net, and Lila's ear caught it, curiosity spiking amid the roar. What betrayal brewed in his ranks, ego fracturing under the weight? Her shots, though, dance the chaos seamless. The Springfield's pulse a lodestar in the blind hits at $90, threading movers that the sensors bloomed false. The hybrid anemometer chiming secondary, but ignored for the ghost's truth. Jamal logged frantic, tablet fogged and sputtering. Your arc's non-Euclidean in the shear, beating the rain's refraction by feel. Sarah patched a gash from flying grit on Lila's cheek, her whisper urgent. Remote's live, he's spiking the next bank, denser. Blindside incoming! The warning landed as the rigs hissed anew, fog thickening to ink, rain pounding like judgment. The sun's ray lancing one final accusatory shaft through the veil. Harlan fired blind into the black, ping sparse at 2 of 5, his roar lost in the gale. Fight me fair, rust bucket! But Lila prone deeper, slurry sucking at her elbows, the rifle's warmth defiant a pulse that cut the lie, whispering of shadows flitching in the drops. Squeeze on the prime, leading the spike she felt in the remote's hum. Crack. Quad ping. The spotter's voice broke. Torres 4, Harlan aboard, overload. Alarms wailed from his lane, the nodule smoking blue in the mist. AI voice garbled, Cascade failure evac protocols! The platoon froze in the downpour, suspense shattering into chaos as Harlan surged up, remote clutched accusatory. Pointing through the fog, she rigged it, her ghost jammed the feeds. But Reyes was there, iron in the slurry, wrenching the device free with a glare that peeled skin. Stand down, Harlan logs don't lie, you're done. The blind's hatch flew, Grant descending like thunder, Voss trailing with cuffs casual in hand, the noon veil parting dramatic as the rain eased, sun reclaiming its forge. Debrief crashed at 13:15 under the mess tent's sodden canopy, the vortex's remnants dripping from eaves like delayed tears, the air trapped humid and heavy with the reek of wet wool and burnt circuits. Lila stood dripping at the folding table, the Springfield case rivulets tracing its scars, while Harlan loomed cuffed to a chair, face ashen under Voss's guard, his crew herded silent in the corner. Grant paced the plank floor, boots squelching judgment, the sun slanting gold through rips to spotlight the wreckage Harlan's nodule dissected on a towel, internals fried like a betrayed heart. Talk, Sergeant, Grant growled, voice gravel over the drip-drip, eyes boring into Harlan like rangefinders. The remote your tweaks to the banks, the spikes, sabotage for a win? Harlan's jaw worked, the noon remnant baking the confession from him, curiosity in the platoon's huddle. Jamal's tablet evidence projected faint turning to grim awe. It was insurance. AI should have crushed her rust don't belong. But the glitches, they started clean, then snowballed. Her hits? Unnatural. Voss snorted, cuff keys jingling. But Grant turned to Lila, gaze softening fraction in the light. And you, Torres, metrics scream impossible 92 in vortex conditions, pulse data sinking to rifle temp like symbiosis. Lila met it steady. The case's pulse faint now, a whisper of satiation. The ghost, Sir Family Vane, reads the veil's lie, the winds flinch. Harlan's spike felt it in the rain's hitch. Murmurs swelled, Sarah's nod fervent, Reyes's faint smile cracking iron. But suspense lingered in Grant's pause. What verdict would the forge yield? He nodded slow, Voss uncuffing Harlan with a warning glare. Court-martial pending, Harlan egos no defense. Torres, you're the hybrid benchmark now. Tear down, waved, study the sink, not the steel. Cheers muffled erupted as the tent cleared. Harlan slinking shadow under guard, his parting glare a fractured promise. What grudge would simmer in Leavenworth's shade? Afternoon dissolved into a haze under the westering sun. The platoon released to dry gear in the grinder's steam. But Lila slipped to the Ose Range alone, the Springfield unpacked on sun-warmed earth, its barrel cooling slow like a sated beast. Jamal and Sarah found her at 1500, towels slung, curiosity drawing them to the berm. You threaded hell, Jamal breathed, tablet dry now with graphs blooming victory. Models obsolete your pulse? It's the key, fractal through the fog. Sarah sat close, wringing her hair, voice soft in the slant light. Harlan's out recycling to basic, but the brass? They're buzzing hybrids for all slots. Lila traced the ghost ring's scar, the pulse a gentle echo now, flashback surfacing. Dad's last Texas noon, the ranch under a sky like judgment, his hand on the stalk as rain threatened. It chooses the storm, kid veils the weak, sharpens the true. When it pulses fierce, you're family to the fight. She'd clung then, 8 and adrift, the rifle her bridge over grief. Now with the vortex's echo fading, curiosity bloomed anew. What greater veil loomed beyond Sims? And what fracture in the future would the ghost mend? Reyes appeared at the tree line, silhouette gold-rimmed, her nod a quiet benediction before vanishing. As the sun dipped, painting the pines crimson, Lila shouldered the rifle, the pulse a promise. The forge tempers, Misha the next noon calls louder. Suspense settled like dusk's hush, curiosity a spark undimmed. What chaos would the hybrid crown demand, and would rust reign eternal in the wire's wake? The noon sun over the Syrian border in early 2025 blazed like a forge god's wrath, turning the endless dunes into a sea of molten gold, where heat waves danced treacherous, distorting the horizon into a lie that could swallow a squad whole. It was 1145 hours local, the zenith's fury baking the air at 120 degrees Fahrenheit, every breath a labored rasp through dust-clogged bandanas, and Sergeant Lila Torres crouched in the scant shade of a bombed-out mud hovel, the Springfield's hybrid rig now a sanctioned prototype, with minimal wiring etched into its rusted soul, slung low across her chest, like a talisman forged in Georgia's trials. 2 years had blurred since the vortex sims that crowned her legend at Fort Moore, the ghost rifle's metrics birthing a doctrine, Torres Protocol, a hybrid ethos blending human hunch with AI whisper, saving sniper slots from the budget axe and earning her a fast track to the 75th Ranger Regiment's recon platoon. But victory's polish had worn thin in the crucible of real ops whispers, from the sims evolving into the sand's deceit, where Harlan's fracture echoed in every glitchy feed from stateside brass. Lila's squad Jamal on drone overwatch, Sarah now a combat medic with scars of her own, and a fresh-faced LT named Ruiz, leading point humped the patrol line through the Wadi's labyrinth, their boots sinking into talc-fine sand that shifted like betrayers underfoot. Curiosity gnawed at Lila's edges, sharper than the wind's bite. What shadow would the ghost unearth here, in this noon inferno where patterns hid in the dune's breath, and what fracture in the hybrid would demand her final trust? Reyes's parting words from rotation stateside echoed faint over the static in her earpiece. The sand doesn't forgive. Torres, listen closer than the wire. The patrol had kicked off at dawn from Fob Echo, a razor wire nest clinging to the Euphrates bend. But the real judgment waited at high noon, when the thermals peaked and illusions bloomed. Intel painted a routine sweep for ISIS holdout smugglers, trafficking drone parts across the porous line, but Layla's gut, synced to the rifle's subtle pulse, whispered otherwise. A thermal bloom on the ridge at 1,100 meters, faint as a mirage, but flitching like prey. The hybrid anemometer on the Springfield chirped tentative data wind. 8 knots quartering, Coriolis negligible, but the ghost overrode it, the barrel warming under her palm like a fever breaking, urging her to scan the false rock outcrops where shadows pooled too deep for the sun's assault. Jamal's voice crackled low from the rear, his tablet patched to the RQ-11 Raven overhead. Drones clear, Sarge nothing but goats and ghosts, but your model's glitching says 40 anomaly in the bloom. Sarah flanked her, medkit slung heavy, her eyes squinting against the glare as she swabbed sweat from Ruiz's brow. Feels off sands too still, like it's holding breath. Lila nodded, curiosity coiling with the suspense, the platoon fanning into wedge formation as the wadi narrowed, dunes rising like silent sentinels. Harlan's echo lingered too, his court-martial a footnote in the barracks lore. But rumors from Leavenworth whispered of off-book hacks, leaking to jihadi nets, fractures in the wire that could turn this sweep to ambush. What if his grudge had seeded deeper than remotes, and the ghost's pulse was the only truth in the lie? By 1200, the zenith clamped down full, the sun a white anvil pounding the sand into glass, mirages rippling the ridge into a watery deceit that played havoc with the squad's optics NVGs, fogging faint even in daylight mode. AI feeds from Echo stuttering with environmental interference. Ruiz called halt in the wadi's throat, a choke point of sheer escarpments where the noon shadows etched knife edges. His voice taut over the net. Torres, overwatch that bloom Jamal, spool the raven higher. Rest, hydrate eyes sharp. Lila peeled off to a sniper's nest in the hovel's ruin, the mud bricks crumbling under her knees like ancient oaths, and prone out with the Springfield. Ta! Its iron sights framing the anomaly through a heat shimmer veil that twisted like smoke from a hidden cookfire. The pulse came insistent now, a thrum syncing her heartbeat to the dune's subtle shift, a grain slide, faint as a whisper, betraying movement beneath. No ping from the hybrid's wire, just the ghost's warmth spreading up the stalk, curiosity flooding her veins. What hid in that bloom? A smuggler cache or Harlan's fracture made flesh. She dry-fired once, the click lost in the wind's hiss, feeling the rifle urge elevation 14 mils. Wind hold 2 left data, the anemometer lagged by seconds. Jamal's drone feed patched to her wrist display flickered errant, blooming false positives. Sarge thermal's spiking, but the AI's calling it goat herd. Your call? Sarah crouched beside, passing a canteen laced with electrolytes. Her voice a thread in the furnace. Ruiz is twitchy, says push on, but the sand's watching. Lila sipped the tepid water, the sun baking the back of her neck like judgment, and keyed her mic low. Negative, LT blooms live, hold and cover, I'm threading it. The first fracture cracked at 12:15, the noon wind shearing sudden from the escarpment's lip, carrying a metallic tang that cut the dust like cordite's ghost. The bloom erupted not goats, but a nest of 4 tangos, ache haze glinting as they crested the ridge, their RPGs shouldered casual against the glare, spotters with binos painting the weighty like artists of death. Shouts in guttural Arabic split the air. Allahu Akbar! And the world exploded into lead, rounds stitching the sand in geysers that bloomed hot and furious. Ruiz's voice thundered over net. Contact! RPG Northridge suppress and bound! The squad erupted, M4s barking in disciplined bursts. Jamal saw hosing the crest, while Sarah dragged a grazed point man to cover, her medkit flying open in the slurry. Lila's nest shuddered as an AK burst chewed the mud bricks inches from her boot, shards stinging like hornets. But she held prone, the Springfield's pulse surging volcanic, a rhythm that drowned the chaos, whispering led the flinch in their breath. No time for the wire, the hybrid's feed glitched snow from the sand's interference, but the ghost cut true, barrel aligning the lead tango at 1050, his RPG tube a black maw in the shimmer. Squeeze, crack the deeper report rolled distinct over the din, the round threading the shear to bloom crimson on his chest, body crumpling like a discarded prayer rug. 1. The spotter tumbled after, Beano's shattering, but the RPG streaked wild, cratering the wadi floor 20 meters short in a plume of fire and regret. Torres clean kill, Ruiz yelled, bounding forward with the fire team, but suspense coiled tighter. The nest had eyes of 5th shadow ghosting the dune's flank, comms antenna glinting faint, patching to who knew what net, Harlan's fracture, or just the desert's deceit. By 12:30, the firefight had devolved into a brutal chess under the unrelenting noon blaze, the sun trapping heat in the wadi like a kiln, where sweat evaporated to salt and shadows shortened to accusations. The tangos rallied savage, 2 more cresting with PKM's chattering death, rounds whining off rocks like vengeful wasps, pinning Ruiz's team in the choke. Jamal's raven feed crackled urgent. Sarge drones inbound. There's 2 quads armed. 500 out AIs blind in the thermals. Sarah's voice overlapped, frantic from cover. Casualty LT's hit, femoral, need evac window. Lila's world narrowed to the rifle's eye, the pulse hammering now like a war drum in her veins, curiosity peeking amid the roar. What shadow did the ghost see in the quad's hum, a pattern Harlan's leaks had seeded? She traversed the sights, the hybrid anemometer chiming futile holds drowned by the sand's lie, and fired on the PKM gunner at 900, leading the gust that bucked the barrel. Crack! Ping! The silhouette jerked, weapon silencing mid-burst, but the quads whirred closer, rotors slicing the haze like mechanical reapers. Ruiz groaned over net, Sarah's tourniquet cinching audible. Torres, take 'em! Evacs 20 mics. The first quad dipped into view at 600, Hellfire light slung lethal, its bloom a false goad in the drone feed, but the ghost warmed prophetic, pulse urging traverse left through the shear. Squeeze, crack the round arced true, shearing a rotor in a cascade of sparks, the quad tumbling end over end into the dune with a muffled whomp. One. The second banked evasive, sun-dappled and mocking. But Lila felt the flinch in its path, the wind's whisper curling around the frame like a noose. Crack, down, flames licking the sand like vengeful tongues. Quads neutralized, Jamal whooped, his saw mopping the ridge as the tangos broke, shadows scattering into the dune's maw. The mop-up dragged under the westering but still fierce sun, the wadi steaming from the RPG's kiss. Ruiz's team bounding to secure the nest, while Sarah stabilized the LT, morphine needle plunging home with practiced grace. Lila held overwatch from the ruin, the Springfield cooling slow like a sated predator, its pulse ebbing to a gentle echo that left her trembling in the aftermath. Curiosity flooded the quiet. What net had the spotter patched to? And did Harlan's fracture lurk in the comms chatter Jamal pulled from the wreck? Logs encrypted Syrian proxy, but the code? Familiar, he reported. Tablet fogged with sweat as he knelt by the quad's guts, fingers tracing fried circuits. Harlan-style off-book tweaks from Leavenworth? Leaked patterns for the jihadis. Sarah glanced up from Ruiz's side, bloodied gloves stark in the light, her voice a mix of awe and edge. You threaded hell again, Sarge. Ghost saw the quads before the wire. Lila nodded, tracing the stock's scars, flashbacks surfacing mid-breath. Assyrian noon in 23, her first tour's dust-choked patrol, the rifle's first live whisper saving a convoy from an IED bloom the AI missed. It chooses the veil, she'd told Reyes then, the gunnies gnawed a bridge across the sand. Now, with the nest-secured AKs stacked, a sat phone cracked open to cords for a bigger cache curiosity sharpened to a blade. What greater shadow did the ghost pulse toward? And would Harlan's grudge follow her across the line? Evac thumped in at 1345, a Blackhawk's rotors whipping the dunes into a blinding vortex. The noon remnant baking the LZ into a skillet where the squad loaded Ruiz aboard, his thumbs up weak but defiant. Lila lingered last, the Springfield slung as medevac crew chief waved her up, but Jamal's tablet pinged final, a decrypted burst from the phone. Torres target legacy rifle. Hybrid flaw. Her blood iced despite the heat, suspense coiling like barbed wire in the gut. Harlan's fracture, alive and aimed. Sarge, Sarah prompted, buckling in, eyes wide on the screen. Lila keyed echo. Command priority exfil extension. Intel hit personal threat. The bird lifted, sand cascading like a shroud, but the pulse stirred anew, faint through the thrum. Listen, Misha, the shadow's vein runs deep. As the wadi shrank below, dunes rolling endless under the sun's slant, curiosity burned undimmed. What hybrid hell would the leak unleash? And what noon would the ghost claim to mend the wire's final lie? Back at Echo by 1400, the decomp tent, a sweltering hive of after-action reviews, Grant's voice gravel over secure link. Torres metrics gold again! But the burst, we're hunting at your ghost the key. Lila nodded to the screen. the rifle at her feet a silent sentinel, its warmth a promise in the shade. The sand didn't forgive, but rust remembered, and in the next zenith's forge, it would whisper louder still.